Welcome to Carolina One Video Training Series. In this webinar, we will be looking at sections 13 through 23 of the Agreement to Buy and Sell Residential Real Estate. Okay, section 13 is entitled Survival, and basically what this says is that if there was something agreed upon between the buyer and seller that is required to be observed, kept, or performed after closing, that it will survive the closing and it still remains binding on the parties. This could center on things like prorations or agreements that they have agreed to within the contract. But basically, if there's something that's supposed to go beyond closing, just because the house closes doesn't mean that seller and buyer are no longer bound to what they had previously agreed to. Section 14 deals with a home warranty and gives you some things here to specify the type of home warranty, who's going to order the home warranty, who will be paying for it, etc. So pretty self-explanatory, but again, who's going to order that? Is that going to be the buyer or seller? And of course that would really fall upon the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. Will it be provided or will it not be provided? So you have a checkbox for that. How much of it or how much will it cost, and who's going to pay for it, buyer or seller? And then the type of home warranty and type of home warranty coverage. Again, we recommend the American Home Shield warranty, and you can find those updated prices and coverage options within your office. Section 15 has to deal with fire, casualty, or injury and how to handle that if it were to take place. If the property is damaged by fire, then the buyer has 5 business days after being notified of the damage to either to terminate the contract. If they don't terminate, then they simply move forward, and the seller agrees to either repair the damages or remit to buyer an amount for repairs or assign to buyer the proceeds of insurance, etc. And so again, it just deals with should something happen during the contract period and how that would be handled in relation to damage to the property. Section 16 deals with the seller's disclosure statement, and pretty much you have 2 choices. Either this box is checked stating that yes, the buyer and seller are agreeing to the seller's disclosure as it has been presented, and or they can simply say we're not going to complete one according to the law, and they'll take that out. So again, you can either go with the seller's disclosure or without. Also, just note here, if after the seller, if the delivery of the disclosure, if the seller discovers something else, then they shall either correct the inaccuracy by delivering a corrected disclosure to the buyer or making reasonable repairs prior to closing. And always remember this, that the seller's disclosure does not replace inspections. They're only statements from the seller about what they recall about the property. They certainly never will take the place of a bona fide home inspection for the buyer. Section 17 deals with lead-based paint and the hazards, and of course, if the home is built prior to 1978, you will have a lead-based paint disclosure, and there's some information associated with that. Section 18 deals with crime and Megan's Law, and basically it states that the parties agree the brokers are not responsible for obtaining or disclosing this information, and again, that is something solely responsibility of the buyer and the seller. Regards to the items listed here, whether it's a sex offender death, clandestine laboratory, a meth lab, or they can get crime information from law officials or elsewhere. So leave that up to the buyers and the sellers. Section 19 deals with the trust account and charitable contributions, and basically this allows a real estate company to take the earnest money, to place that earnest money into an interest-bearing account. But in order for them to do that, they have to have the buyer and seller's permission. And so here, we always recommend that you check may. And then what happens is the earnest money, the money that's earned, the interest that's earned from that earnest money, we actually donate that to various charities here in our area. So it's just a good way to support our local areas as well. Section number 20 has to do with South Carolina income tax, and basically it's just stating that the seller and buyer will follow the South Carolina income tax laws. Section 21 states that this is a binding agreement. In other words, this agreement represents all of the agreement. There's no other agreement, oral or otherwise, that modify the terms of this agreement. There's no backdoor arrangements or anything like that. That this is the entire agreement. Section number 22 deals with adjustments, and basically these are things that are going to take place at closing. There are certain fees, taxes, assessments, HOA fees, things like that may be adjusted at the closing date by the closing attorney, and so this just stipulates that those things will take place. And then Section 23 deals with default, and basically default's a bad word. Default is when a seller decides that they no longer want to fulfill their obligations. If they do, there are three things that a buyer may do in response to that. And the same way with the buyer, if the buyer chooses to default, there are three things that the seller may choose to do. So again, keep in mind these are more than just loss of earnest money, but they can pursue any remedies available to the seller or buyer according to the law, including attorney's fees, etc. If either or both parties default, they do agree to sign an escrow deposit disbursement agreement or release agreement, and then parties may agree in writing to allow a cure period, so giving them a chance to maybe work through some of those issues. So again, just some technical things there about the contract you want to become familiar with, and we will cover the rest of the material in our upcoming webinar.